Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all very much for connecting. And welcome to this webinar, Investor-Led Decarbonisation, Supporting Portfolio Companies to Reach Net Zero. And I'm very happy to be joined by an expert panel this afternoon. Cecilia Verne, who is the Sustainability and ESG Director at BBGI. And our very own Rachel Delacour, CEO and co-founder of Sweep. Hello to you both. Thank you again very much for joining and sharing your time with us this afternoon. Perhaps Cecilia, as I suppose a relative newbie to this, maybe I can hand over to you just to share a short introduction to your role and to give us a bit of background to BBGI.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be part of this webinar today. Thank you, Sam and Rachel, for the invitation. I am Cecilia Verne, ESG and Sustainability Director of BBGI, also chairwoman of our ESG committee. But let's start with who is BBGI? So we are a listed investment company focused on social infrastructure. So you have to think hospitals, schools, civic buildings, major transport networks like highways and large bridges. And we operate across highly regulated markets, including the EU, the UK, Canada, and Australia. What do? Well, we mostly operate on the public-private partnership models. That means we're not just passive investors, but we stay involved over the long term. We oversee the day-to-day operations and maintenance of these real assets. So in many ways, we act as stewards. We look after them until they're handed back to the public sector at the end of their concession period. And what's in it for sustainability at BBGI, where there's a very long-term perspective combined with the essential social role that our assets play that really defines how we approach sustainability, which is really embedded from the start, the investment decision, and across all the asset management strategy. And in my role, I lead the integration of ESG across the portfolio, ensuring that we deliver on the social, the climate goals, but that we also uphold strong governance and keep our transparency standards up.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cecilia, and super interesting. I think to get that background and some of that context, I know some of the folks joining today will be from financial institutions of different sort of shapes and sizes, but interesting to link that back to sort of your role and the types of investments you guys have at BBGI. Format today for those connecting, we'll have around 20 minutes of panel discussion. Really looking forward to learning more from both Cecilia and Rachel on their experience on this topic. And we'll be saving at least 10 minutes at the end for some Q&A. You should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a dedicated Q&A tab. If you click on that, feel free to write in your questions at any time during the webinar. And we'll take those, as I said, at the end of the session, and we'll go between Cecilia and Rachel to give you some answers to those. So without further ado, I think we can get started. And I think wanted to just sort of zoom in a little bit more, and you talked about governance, Cecilia, at the beginning there in your introduction. I think, starting a decarbonisation journey, it can often feel like a big undertaking for portfolio companies. Can you share any examples of things that you guys have done in the past at BBGI where you've established strong collaborative relationships with your portfolio companies and regarding their decarbonisation goals to sort of get them started on their journey? Maybe some examples that you've witnessed and can share with the audience today.
Yeah, sure. Well, it is true. Starting a decarbonization journey can feel really daunting for portfolio companies, especially those operating on the long-term contractual frameworks like PPPs. And at BBGI, we've always found that building trust is foundational. And anything on the topic of ESG, decarbonization, sustainability, I really leverage on the long-term relationships that I've already built up by the asset management team. In general, rather than to dictate our own terms, we always try to engage in a dialogue and share best practices. And I'll give an example of this. It was back in 2020, one of our transport assets, a major road project in North America, began thinking about ways to reduce their operational emissions. And rather than imposing a top-down directive, we collaborated with the facility operator on site to establish a baseline and think about together realistic initiatives. And I think we have to be a bit humble there and remember that the people that know the assets better are the people that are there on a daily basis, on site, day to day. So they're going to have a lot of the ideas and the expertise for any of those initiatives. And after this thinking process, that collaboration led to the installation of 130 solar panels on the maintenance center, so alongside an EV charging center. And last year, a few years after, the same project replaced a vehicle that is used for highway maintenance by an electric one. So what I want to highlight from this example is really we can see a gradual process. You start somewhere and then you build up from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Cecilia. And indeed, I think super interesting that approach to target those on the front line and perhaps those who can have the most impact ultimately. Super interesting on that front. And um, I suppose, how can investors perhaps and portfolio companies align on some of this governance structure? Is it very much coming from you? Is it that collaborative perhaps effort that you mentioned? And really just, I suppose, ensure accountability and progress in their decarbonisation efforts. So I suppose, what's the sort of the longer term engagement there that you might be able to share?
That's an interesting topic. I try not to have a too long answer there. But one of our core approach, I think, is to embed the topic sustainability into our existing decision-making structures like the board meetings. And this is definitely the right forum because we have on those boards our own directors, the service provider representative, eventually co-shareholders when there are some. And this ensures that sustainability is not treated as an add-on, but really as a core consideration right alongside other operational topics such as the impact of inflation, asset valuation, loan repayments, health and safety risk, and then next in the agenda is sustainability or ESG. And how we've achieved this? Well, a few years ago, we've decided to make ESG a standing agenda item mandatory for all quarterly board meetings across all the portfolio companies. And at first, discussions were relatively light, often centered on small side initiatives. But over time, these conversations have deepened, and today we are seeing increasingly material discussions. And what's particularly encouraging is the growing engagement from all parties. And there is, another key piece of the governance puzzle in our consideration with a global portfolio is to stay aligned with the public sector strategies at national levels. So since we operate under PPP frameworks, our public sector clients are really critical stakeholders. And to support that alignment, we participate in local working groups. We raise sustainability at every client meeting. We proactively share the outcome of any study or assessment that we've made. And this really helps create a two-way dialogue. We gain a better understanding of our clients' priorities, and they gain a partner who's committed and forward-looking.
Mm. Okay. Thank you, Cecilia. So I think, we've talked about trust, we've talked about long-term relationships, engaging at sort of different levels within organizations. Rachel, if we come to you, sort of shifting this away from perhaps the sort of the human and the relationship side of things to think about technology, what are you seeing, I suppose, based on your experience in the role of technology in helping to support communication, be it across departments or indeed across value chains, while bringing together sort of different data sources? I don't know if you can share a couple of comments on that side.
Yeah, and as Cecilia was mentioning, there is that dialogue that you want to start with your portfolio, your company portfolio, and orchestrating that dialogue at scale, at the scale of those companies who themselves as a possible important value chain, it can be absolutely difficult. So of course the digital, and technology can connect those dots. So this is where software vendors like Sweep, but like others, are really doing their part to make sure we are connecting all those dots to make that dialogue and that, to orchestrate that and to make sure that there is that collective climate action actually who is really who is really acting, and for the first reasons, we are orchestrating these dialogues, the action, the reduction of these emissions, how Cecilia is able to to assess, what's being done in your portfolio, Cecilia. But what we heard also from those portfolio companies is or the hospitals, or that you are investing in, is it's really difficult to start. We don't know where to start, and what's great with technology and with that climate action is that we are really seeing that all this, at the end of the day, it's a data project. And it's okay to start small, but companies, they have to start. And it's okay to not understand really yet, but we are here to make it very obvious. But there are so many companies who are saying, I don't have the data. I just don't know where to start. I don't have the data. Of course, all the pixels of data that resides in all the information systems, HR systems, procurement systems, production systems, etc., etc. Everything is emitting something, actually. All those data points, this is where our job as a software vendor in carbon accounting, ESG field, is really to make sure that we are giving an equivalence, of all those data points, as that we are giving that carbon equivalence, so that Cecilia is really able to consolidate all that information. And this is where technology is organizing it. This is where companies overall and investment funds, etc., must understand that technology is already organized to do it. Okay, so it can go even faster than what everyone is thinking about. Oh yeah, but I don't have it, I don't know where to start. It's all about making sure Cecilia, but also who is investing, but also all the investment portfolio is really is not having disruption, in their value chain when it comes to extra financial data. So it's really part of there is financial for short-term, mid-term management, but there is also that extra financial piece for mid-term, long-term management, of the disruption of the business. And it all must come together. And the technology, digital, is connecting all those dots, because your carbon is always the carbon of someone else.
Indeed. So I think, again, just sort of looping on some of those points, Rachel, you talked about, let's not be overwhelmed. Let's start somewhere. Even if we start small, we can grow, and how technology can be used to support those initiatives with, of course, the support and guidance from investors like Cecilia, if we put ourselves in the shoes of those portfolio companies. Just sort of on a similar angle, obviously, we're all aware of the sort of economic climate at the moment, and I think it's difficult to talk about these topics today without also considering, what is the potential return on these kind of initiatives and investments. And maybe, Cecilia, if we can come back to you, I mean, when you're having conversations with your investees about decarbonisation strategies, I mean, how important is that sort of ROI, return on investment, discussion as part of any initiatives that they want to put in place, or you want to encourage them to put in place?
Yeah, I think I got into that job because I'm a dreamer, but I stay into this job because I'm pragmatic. Return on investment is crucial. And decarbonization and sustainability starts often from a values-driven effort, but we also need to make the business case very clear. And it's typically linked to cost avoidance or cost reductions, particularly everything that's related to energy efficiency, sometimes also a bit the resilience aspect. But we operate in public infrastructure, so we have to demonstrate very tangible returns, and they are key so that we can have the funding and also ensuring the ongoing support. However, in PPP frameworks, this gets very fast, very complex. These long-term contracts were set up 5-10 years ago. They're highly prescriptive. Often they didn't account or anticipate decarbonization upgrades. So if you take an example of a solar panel installation, the contract will have spelled out in very much details who pays for the electricity, how the costs are allocated, what operational KPIs must be met. So the moment you introduce a new technology like solar, it requires a careful rethink of the gain share mechanism. So if the facilities and maintenance provider benefit from lower electricity bills, that's great. But some party, maybe BBGI or another party, had made the investment. So how can those gains be shared? For how long? And if BBGI can step in to help structure the initial capital of these upgrades, the economics still need to be balanced and very clearly defined. And especially, we have a duty to demonstrate how they ultimately return to the public sector over time. And then you add the layer of risk. So adding solar panels on a roof changes its structural aspects of a building, and what are their insurance implications? Are those new installation resilient against high winds or an extreme weather condition? And who takes responsibility of this new installation if something goes wrong? So each of these elements, aside the return of investment, the contractual, financial, technical, and operation, they all need to be addressed. So it's really a multi-dimensional conversation.
Yes, and very interesting to think about those sort of different aspects, Celia. I think, not being on the ground in those discussions, you think of a sustainability initiative, but, having some insight in all of the other thought process that goes around that and getting that actually into place. What kind of metrics are you guys sort of monitoring, I guess, as part of those ROI discussions, Cecilia, with your portfolio companies?
Well, focusing on the topic of decarbonization, we focus on the metrics that are relevant for our decision making, but also the ones that are available. That's sometimes also a key point. We start quite simply with the underlying activity data. That's the energy consumption, liters, kilowatt hours, the materials used or the sent to waste, that's in tons or in kilograms, the water consumption in cubic meters, the types of service purchased. So this really provides the operational context behind the emissions. From there, we calculate the carbon impact. So the classic greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. This enables us to have a baseline. And I think it's not a secret for anyone, but it took us a few years to have a baseline that's stable. We also started to model avoided emissions, which help us simulate the potential impact of decarbonization initiatives on the asset's total footprint. What I particularly find very useful is also the carbon intensity by asset. So here we use specific metrics depending on the asset type. In the case of roads, we'll look at emissions per single line kilometer. The longer the roads or the shorter the road or the wider it is, it kind of have a different footprint. For buildings, it's going to be emissions by square meter of the floor area that we manage. And this approach helps us map emissions profiles by different sectors and also quickly identify outliers.
Mm.
Then there's a
Okay.
set of financial metrics and also the remaining concession period, handback arrangements, payback periods. For the initial investment, we'll look at the capital expenditure to have an estimate of the initial investment. And you finish with a layer of all the intangible, the qualitative aspects, such as the governance dynamics and who are the key stakeholders. Are there going to be promoters or blockers of the initiative, and any other technical aspect that could stop the initiative?
Lots of metrics by the sounds of things in Pathia that are being monitored and tracked as part of this. Rachel, if we come to you, I mean, how, based on your conversations with, be it Sweep customers or within your network, how are you seeing companies sort of balancing sustainability and a focus on ROI, particularly perhaps in today's climate?
Now, what I can tell you, and just about rebaselining, Cecilia, we've been there with so many of our large customers about rebaselining, and it can be very difficult, but fortunately, as well, analytics tools, etc., have been developed to address that problem, that challenge. And on the ROI, it's it's not just being idealist for a company to say that because they are, they are monitoring their extra financial data, it will possibly bring an ROI. No, it is already bringing lots of ROIs with an S for companies. What we are seeing among our customers is that the fact that they are able to show that they are monitoring their transition to a low carbon economy means that they are future proofing their business in itself. And what they have seen is that, for example, when it comes to the top line, when it comes to answering RFPs to get new markets or new customers, or just renew some of their customers, depending on the customer, the large customers you are answering to, that extra financial part, the fact that you are monitoring it can be in some RFPs absolutely important, absolutely crucial for the customers you want to sign with. So some of our customers, they're saying the fact that we are monitoring it at a granular level through time and that we are auditable is something that is maybe it's not perfect, and this is fine. We are all in a startup mode, when it comes to sustainability. But the fact that it's under control and monitored and with lots of energy to reduce those emissions, etc., it's like being considered as a forever company. This is how we are calling our customers, and it helps, to generate revenue, to renew some customers that you are working with. But it also helps on the bottom line, when it comes to access to cash. So of course, access to Cecilia's decisions, about investing or not. But also when you are contracting debts or loans, or else, banks today continue to want to invest in companies who are already working on their transition to a low carbon economy. We know where the world is heading. We know the mega trend, despite all what is said today, with all those different administrations. But for those companies, they are already seeing that ROI on their top line and on their bottom line. There is the price of the shares, for internal audits also that we are seeing with some of our customers. And we have many, many examples like this. It has to be shared. It has to become a literature of the ROI of sustainability. So we are actively participating to that, to gather all those feedbacks. But it's the companies of tomorrow and the good investments of Cecilia of tomorrow, definitely.
Thank you, Rachel. And you've talked about companies of tomorrow, long-term vision, long-term investment. If we think about, the decarbonisation process, we know that it takes a long time. Cecilia, how do you go about keeping those portfolio companies engaged and motivated throughout the long term? Because, those returns are not always immediate. So, yeah, what are you guys doing, and how are you engaging with those portfolio companies to keeping them sort of motivated in this sort of longer term decarbonization process?
Yeah, that's a good question. BBGI typically holds assets for 20 years. So I think none of us know where we're going to be in 20 years, but we know we're still going to be the stewards of those assets. So long-term commitment is really part of our DNA. And to keep the momentum going through that journey, I think we try to make a point of celebrating the small wins. So when a building completes the installation of LED lighting, we communicate on that success. We have short case studies on our website. We include highlights on our annual sustainability report. And that's an important moment, I think, to recognize the efforts, and often behind the scenes efforts made by all of our teams to reach these milestones. But really, I think there's a very important aspect, which is crucial, is that this recognition, this reinforcement, this motivation must come from the top. And within our ESG committee at BBGI, we have a strong mix of leadership. We have members of our management board, the CEO, the head of asset management, the head of new acquisitions. And having sustainability discussed at this senior level, and then cascaded down into team and even individual objective. That's, I think, what really ensures that engagement remains consistent and meaningful year after year.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Cecilia, for those insights. Rachel, I don't know if you want to add a word or two on what we're seeing, I suppose, at Sweep in terms of sort of the value of data tracking in supporting portfolio companies and sort of keeping that engagement and momentum over a longer period of time, and keeping them motivated, I guess, towards that sort of decarbonisation goals as well.
Yeah, and I will go fast because we have a few times remaining for questions, but definitely all this data tracking for when you are an investment structure, institution, etc. It's the more you start to collect that information, the more you start to benchmark it, the more you start to create that literature, that content, about what's doing great, what can be improved or else. This is creating that literature of the performance of your fund actually, and that content, that libraries of content, and all what we can do, what we have done already within Sweep, for example, in terms of artificial intelligence, to suggest those benchmarks for companies, to help them to compare themselves per industries, etc. This is where the intelligence about how you can faster decarbonize depending on your industry, how you can show that value to all this. It's I think that we are seeing a strong we are seeing this decarbonization at a fast pace, actually, thanks to technology, because of that knowledge sharing, actually. So the more you track, the more you are able to benchmark yourself as a company or as an investment institution, and the more you can get your more value out because you are working with forever companies.
Yes. And just coming back to those data points, and Cecilia, and again, keeping an eye on time to leave some time for questions at the end. But, I think we've talked a lot about data in this process. How can, investors like BBGI, how can you support your portfolio companies, I suppose, effectively sort of collect, analyze, and utilize that sustainability data? What are you seeing, and how are you using data at the moment?
Yeah, here I'm going to be, I think, 100% aligned with a few things that Rachel, you've already mentioned. So I do think that data really drives everything we do today. And personally, I'm a very big fan of having a lot of information at my fingertips. It really helps to spot patterns, see what's working, identify exceptions quickly. But to be honest, handling all that data manually is really a struggle and only gets you so far. So in infrastructure, operations tend to be relatively stable. So how we started as an investor is to encourage our partners to start with what's already being measured. So Rachel, you said start small. I think it's the same idea. Energy use, water, waste, and then you build from there year on year. We see our role as providing the template, the guidance to harmonize a bit the approach across the different jurisdictions so everyone speaks the same language. And also, most portfolio companies don't have the resources to develop, to onboard kind of a system or even to have the expertise in-house. And it took me a while to find a tool that would not just lighten the workload, but actually add a real strategic value. And so since we started using Sweep, I've been able to centralize, structure the data across the portfolio. It's easier to analyze, it's more accurate, and I can also act on it better. But what I really found the most rewarding and exciting part of using a collaborative platform like Sweep is that after years of asking others for data, I can give something back for the first time. And when the teams on site, they see the results of the data they provide, an interactive dashboard, a visual trend, suddenly what they see is the bigger picture. And this resonates. And I've had very positive feedback from our on-site teams of being onboarded on the platform. Suddenly they've got visibility. It gives them the very important impression to contribute to the sustainability effort. And now I've got a lot of questions. what can we do, what can we leverage, how can they benefit from all this data being on a tool. So on our next big focus now is to bring the results of our decarbonization studies that we've done for some of our assets, find the best way to put them into sweep and have everything in one place, planning timelines, see different decarbonization strategy scenarios, track progress over time. So I'm very excited to start this next stage of data.
Great. Thank you, Cecilia. And I think it's interesting. We've almost gone full circle there about how data is helping to drive engagement and collaboration with those folks who are on the front line and who can have the most impact. And I think certainly resonates, I think, with conversations we're having across with other customers, as if we can give something back, if we can show them, as you say, in a very visual sense, then that drives further engagement and further action in this decarbonization process. Thank you both, Rachel and Cecilia. I know we're pretty much at time. There were just one or two questions that perhaps we can squeeze in before we sign off. And one was coming back to sort of technology and data. I don't know, Rachel, if you've got a comment on AI and how it can contribute to the conversation. And likewise, perhaps to Cecilia as well, whether you're seeing anything on the artificial intelligence side of things that is perhaps accelerating conversations or decarbonization. Rachel, I don't know if you've got a
very
comment
quick.
there.
Very quickly, thank you, Sam. What we are saying is that, during the last 30 years, companies, they had not that time, but they've been building their financial stack, with jobs, internal jobs, external auditors, tech stack for financial, etc. It took 3 decades, okay, to organize all this. And they are asked today, those businesses, they are asked today to do that kind of same efforts, to provide the same output when it comes to extra financial data, but in 3 to 4 years, okay? They have to organize that same level of data stack, etc., granularity, but in a very short amount of time, which can be seen as a, wow, it's too complicated. This is also why the CSRD, etc., were pretty, were bashed. I don't know if we can say that in English, but blamed, and kind of stopped. But yeah, so this is where. Why it has to be done in very short amount of time? It's also because there is an urgency out there. There is climate change, and companies have to absolutely react fast, to mitigate all this. And this is where technology can really help, to go faster, in the way you're organizing your tech stack to make better decision. AI is coming in the game, to share best practices, in a very short amount of time. You have access to so many benchmarks of who is doing what you can possibly be inspired by, and also everything related to non-structured data, text data, etc. It's really giving lots of intelligence at the same time on how and it's a lot of time to value, in your sustainability journey. So AI injected on the right data stack can really be magic to go faster.
Cecilia, going faster, anything you're seeing on AI to help us accelerate?
A few examples, very very specific to our assets, but in buildings, for example, energy optimization with AI software can really help reduce the energy use in buildings. It looks at the live demand, the occupancy, the weather outside, and it automatically adjusts heating, cooling, and lighting. So that has very strong impact on particularly in 24/7 buildings like large hospitals. On roads, there's similar applications. It can dim or brighten the light based on the traffic, based on the weather. Again, it's going to cut electricity reuse, but keep the road safe. There's also the possibility, when you combine AI and satellite imagery, to detect risks alongside the road from the vegetation that's there. It can be unstable trees that are going to fall, or overgrown natural patches that are block certain signs or that block solar panels. And you can now screen this instantaneously rather than having a patrolling. If the longest road, it gets very difficult to do on a regular basis. So I think AI depends a lot on the availability of data and the integration with other tools, but when applied, it can be a very powerful enabler.
Great.
It's empty as well, but it can be emitted and consciously, and but the time to action is really great, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to obviously balance that with the sustainability impact of artificial intelligence and, the electricity consumption that we're all aware of. But I think used wisely, I think it definitely can help accelerate to some of the examples that you've shared, Cecilia, on that as well. Thank you again both for your time this afternoon. Some really great insights, and I hope for the audience some very concrete examples that they can take away and learn from and potentially put into practice in their own work. Perhaps just to sort of close out, I come back to your point and your comment, Rachel. We're all in startup mode with sustainability and decarbonisation. So I think the challenge is to get started, start small, and to focus on the rewards and to drive that decarbonisation journey. So we'll end on that positive note. But again, thank you very much, Cecilia and Rachel, for your comments this afternoon. And thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.